Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year! My name is Miranda, and I will be your Enchantress of Avalon, taking you on a magical and mystical journey into the lands of enchantment and into Avalon. For this first video of the new year, 2022, I can't believe it's already 2022, I have chosen another goddess to cover, and today we're going to be going over my favorite goddess of the Norse pantheon, and that is Freya. And I actually have my little Freya statue. I'm going to put her in the foreground, but I wanted you to be able to see her better. She is very small, so she's going to be back here for the rest of the video, watching over us. And Freya is a goddess of love, sexuality, witchcraft, and war. So she covers a lot of things. And Freya is, as I've gone over a lot of the other goddesses that I've talked about on this channel, is a true great goddess figure. And that means a goddess that is ruling over many different elements, many different areas. She isn't just a goddess of love. She isn't just a war goddess. She isn't just a goddess of witchcraft. And she isn't just a goddess of death, but she is all of these things in one. She really rules over the full spectrum of experience, the full lifetime. She is birth and death and rebirth. So that is a large part why I'm so fascinated by her and why I feel drawn to her. And the book that I have with me that I'll probably be flipping through slightly just to get a little bit of extra info if I forget something is entitled Fire Jewel, a devotional for Freya, and it was compiled by someone named, I don't know if I'm going to get this name right, but Geffian van der Doder. I do apologize if I mispronounce that name. And it is a very comprehensive book that talks about all the different associations of Freya, and it has spells and all sorts of different things. There's songs in here too, which are quite lovely. I'll show you. So that's great. So, when most people think of Freya, the automatic thing that I hear a lot of times is, oh, well, isn't she basically the Norse pantheon's answer to Aphrodite? It's not that simple. If we're trying to just pair up 1-to-1 ratio, then technically, being that she is a goddess of both love and sexuality, and the most beautiful of all the goddesses in the Norse pantheon, then yes, that would align her most with Aphrodite. But there are aspects that I would argue align her with Persephone, and aspects that align her with Hera, because she does have this leadership element. And an important factor I want to talk about is this confusion over, is Freya the same goddess as Frigg or Frigga? Frigg or Frigga, she goes by both names, is the wife of Odin, and therefore the queen of the gods in the Norse pantheon. But there's a lot that makes people believe that she may just be an aspect of Freya, and I think it's a valid theory. We really don't have answers. You could read some people who say, oh, absolutely not, they are two separate goddesses, and then others that say they're absolutely the same goddess. And that is partially because we want to think the most powerful goddess in a pantheon is the consort of the most powerful god. That lines up with us very easily. And it is undoubtedly Freya who is the most powerful of the Norse gods. And I do want to point out, she is actually not a member of the Seer. She did not come from Asgard. She is a member of the Vanir gods, and they are gods of the earth. They are gods of these natural earthy rights, and and I don't just mean of the earth, meaning that they're associated with the element earth. Freya is most associated with fire. Her father, or at least we believe in most versions of the mythos that he is her father, uh, would be Njord. He is a sea god. So you don't have to be elementally connected to earth, but they are connected to the land. They're connected to nature. And very importantly, they are fertility deities. So they have this very grounded, very sexual nature to them. And that's across the board. The three that we associate with being Vanir gods, who then came over and lived with the Aesir, are Njord, Freya, and her twin brother Frey, or Freyr. You could call him either. And they all have that association with fertility and with sexuality, especially Freya and Freyr, though, have that association. So what we have is this very powerful deity who is living in Asgard, who is the most powerful goddess of the entire Norse pantheon. But the question remains, is she also Odin's wife? Is she also Frigg? Maybe. That's the best answer we have, actually, is maybe. Because some will state unequivocally, of course they're the same goddess. Others will get very angry at the assumption that they're the same goddess. So I say go with what it feels right to you. Personally, I think that there's a lot of validity in the thought that they could be aspects of the same goddess, because we see goddesses being aspected throughout all pantheons and across ancient cultures. We have these goddesses that are intertwined and aspects of one another, and we see this happening over and over and over again. So I think the fact that a great goddess figure like Freya could have aspects as well is perfectly valid. So personally, I more see Frigg and Freya as interconnected in that way, and that Frigg could be an aspect of Freya. That is my opinion. Although I think it's just as perfectly valid for others to have opinions that they are different goddesses entirely, and that's valid. Another reason I feel they could be the same goddess is similarity over what they rule over. We know that Freya is a goddess associated with love and sexuality, and in turn, she's also associated with being a protectress, sorry about that, of wives and mothers. And as a fertility deity, she is the deity that women would pray to. She's the goddess women would pray to if they wanted to conceive and to protect them when they were giving birth. They would call upon Freya. And we know that Frigg had very similar aspects, being a queen goddess. These are similar aspects, especially of protecting wives and protecting during childbirth. That is something we see through many cultures, that queen goddesses are associated with protecting wives and protecting mothers. And we definitely see that if we want to jump over to the Greek pantheon, we see that with Hera. Hera was a great protectress of wives and mothers, which people think is ironic given how she behaved. But, I mean, how would you feel if your husband was off sleeping with anything that moved? I know I'd feel pretty insecure too. That being said, back over to Freya and Frigg. Because Freya has all these associations, I think that they could be the same person. And the next point I want to make as why they could be the same person is that Freya is said to have had a husband at one point, but it was off in the distance, kind of lost in the ether. But we only know his name was Odur, and that he was apparently a traveler who wandered off and just kind of never came back. And she searched, and there is a myth that states that she searched for him for many years. I think it's kind of presumptuous to say that Odir could not have been Odin. Their names sound very similar, and we know that Odin is a wandering god. It's one of his primary aspects, is this wanderer who will go to different places and challenge these people to see if they are behaving by the will of God. So I think it's very valid to think that that could have been one of his other names. So there's that. I do want to note also, where Freya is concerned, that there are some sources and some scholars that state that her first husband was her brother Frey, or Freyr, and that the Vanir often married siblings, and that this was just accepted there, not as accepted in the Aesir though. And so they had, I suppose, divorced, and she had married Oder, or Odin, if we're going with that theory. And that's how that came to be. I think this is a very valid theory. I think that makes a lot of sense, as we do have sibling marriages in nearly every pantheon of gods and goddesses across the board. And even in some cases, sibling marriages of gods inspired sibling marriages of actual rulers. And that is most evident in the pharaohs of ancient Egypt. Their primary deities, Osiris and Isis, were siblings who were married. So they also would go on to marry siblings. And this was even adopted by the Ptolemies, although they did it because they wanted to keep their bloodline as Greek as possible, ironically. But they were also declaring themselves as living embodiments of gods, so it made sense to marry siblings. So that is why I feel that, yes, Freya and Freyr likely could have been married before that war that had them. There was a war between the Aesir and the Vanir that ended with Freya and Freyr and Njord coming and living in Asgard amongst the Aesir. I think that could have been something, and I think that also would make the utmost of sense if you're ending a war to bring together these two rival factions of gods. Having a marriage be the thing that cements the end of that war would make so much sense. And marrying off the most powerful female to the most powerful male, and therefore cementing the end of the war. We see that in real history. That to end a war completely, having a marriage contract, that treaty be a marriage, is hugely important. We saw it, for example, in the Wars of the Roses, or what was then called the Cousins' Wars. Elizabeth of York was married to Henry Tudor, who became Henry VII, who was a Lancastrian king. York and Lancaster united to end the war. Of course, there were some Yorkist uprisings later, but that pretty much ended the war. So I think that's one more final point as why Frigga and Freya might be the same. And also the name Friday is named for as Freya's Day. And some people also say Frigg's Day. So I think from ancient times onward, they were associated as being possibly the same goddess. So yes. And I am running out of time for this video. So I want to thank all of you for listening. And this was your introduction to Freya and her associations with Frigg in Norse mythology. So I hope you have a great new year, and I will see you next Sunday. My name is Miranda, and I have been your Enchantress of Avalon. Thank you.